June 2019. The dry, oppressive heat weighed heavily on Socorro County, New Mexico, where an abandoned wooden cabin stood alone amid the cracked desert. The beam from the forensic technician's flashlight cut through years of accumulated dust, sweeping across the silent concrete floor and illuminating something no one was ever meant to find. Central, we need backup at the old Socorro cabin and send the coroner's investigator immediately. His voice echoed in the empty space, answered only by the wind whipping through the rotting boards. What began as a routine survey requested by the cold case unit had just become something else entirely. Something that could finally answer the questions that had haunted the town of Truth or Consequences for 7 years. Beneath the freshly cut concrete, an unnatural shape emerged, wrapped in nylon, buried deep in the hard-packed earth. One detail immediately silenced the forensic team. The zip tie matched evidence collected in 2013, the same kind of zip tie that had been suspected but never proven. For 7 years, Lauren McKay's disappearance had been a story of unanswered questions. A young woman, a beloved teacher, vanished without a trace. After an argument one March evening, the door locked from the inside, the porch light still on, 2 children asleep in rooms their mother would never return to, 2 empty chairs at every dinner for 7 years, a bedroom her husband kept untouched, afraid to move her things. Before we continue this shocking story, take a second to hit subscribe and like this video. Your support helps bring forgotten cases back into the light, and the algorithm will make sure you never miss a future upload. Because the discovery at the Socorro cabin wasn't just the end of a missing person case. It was the first domino in a chain of events that would unearth secrets buried in the New Mexico desert. When authorities finally identified a suspect and executed an arrest warrant in 2020, it wasn't a stranger or an anonymous predator. It was someone the town had trusted, someone who had joined the searches for Lauren, someone who had lived among them for 7 years, carrying an unimaginable secret. The McKay case isn't just a solved mystery. It's proof of the persistence of investigators who refused to let files gather dust, and of advances in forensic science, tools that finally gave a voice back to a victim silenced for far too long. It's also the story of a community torn apart. After Lauren vanished, suspicion spread like desert wildfire. Neighbors eyed each other warily, families questioned one another, and the quiet cracks in a small town became glaringly visible. Those cracks would explode when the truth finally came out after 7 years. What makes this case especially haunting is this: the answer was always right there. The suspect had been interviewed in the first week of the investigation, but slipped through the cracks. He attended prayer vigils for Lauren, stood beside her family, and looked straight into the eyes of desperate people searching for the truth, while hiding the most horrific secret of all. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. I'm always curious how these stories connect us across such vast distances. Tonight, we're going back to 2013, tracing the steps of that mysterious disappearance and uncovering the stunning breakthrough that brought one of New Mexico's coldest cases into the light. This is a story of loss, of persistence, of lies hidden in the dark, and of justice delayed, but never denied. New Mexico in 2013 was the arid heart of the American Southwest, where red rock mountains and deserts stretched to the horizon. After the 2008 financial crisis, life here was still slowly recovering. Small towns survived on ranches, solar farms, a few gas stations, and resorts along Elephant Butte Lake. Population was sparse, homes separated by wide expanses of land and year-round blowing dust. The town of Truth or Consequences in Sierra County had fewer than 10,000 residents, a community where everyone knew each other's faces, and news traveled faster than the desert wind. In that town, Lauren McKay, 35, was an elementary school teacher, beloved by her students for her patience and kindness. Her husband, Ethan McKay, 40, worked freelance in landscape design, an unstable job but enough to support their 5 children. They lived in a 2-story wooden house on the northern edge of town, where every sunset painted the valley red. Their life had once been peaceful until simmering marital tensions began to surface: money troubles, work stress, and the exhaustion of years spent isolated from the rest of the world. That March, the weather was dry and cold, with strong winds carrying sand and the sharp smell of earth. One late evening, after a brief argument in the living room, Lauren stepped out of the house. She wore a thin jacket, carried her phone, and said she just needed to walk to clear her head. Ethan stayed inside, assuming she'd return like always. The night passed, and the house fell silent. The next morning, the sky was gray and cold, but Lauren still hadn't come back. Her phone went unanswered, her car sat untouched in the driveway, and her purse and keys lay exactly where she'd left them on the kitchen table. Ethan walked the neighborhood, called around, asked neighbors. No one had seen his wife since the night before. By late morning, he called the local police to report that his wife had been missing since the previous night. The call came into the Socorro County Sheriff's Office, dispatch at 9:57 a.m., classified as an adult missing person. In a small community like Truth or Consequences, disappearances were rare, but procedure was followed fully. 2 patrol officers, Sergeant Bill Landers and Deputy Rose Delgado, were dispatched to 218 Sunset Drive, a residential area on the northern edge of town, bordering open desert. The patrol car pulled up to the 2-story gray wooden house, where the sun glared off the windows and wind kicked up sand across the low fence. Ethan McKay waited on the porch, looking exhausted, holding his phone still open to the call log. Landers showed his badge, explained their presence, and asked to enter and check the house. Scene documentation began immediately. All doors were locked, hinges intact, no pry marks, window frames undamaged, security latches engaged. The doorknobs still held a thin layer of undisturbed dust. Inside, the house was quiet. The living room was tidy. The dining table still held last night's dishes. A nearly empty water glass sat on the coffee table, and Lauren's cell phone lay on the sofa. In the kitchen corner, the wall clock had stopped at 12:07, battery dead. No signs of a struggle or disturbance. Upstairs, the 3 children were still asleep in their rooms. Doors closed, curtains drawn, unaware anything had happened overnight. Ethan stated that Lauren left around 9:30 p.m. after a minor argument. She wore a thin jacket and said she wanted to walk to cool off. He thought nothing of it and didn't stop her. When he checked at midnight, her side of the bed was empty and the bedside lamp was still on. He waited until morning, called a few of her friends with no luck, then contacted police. Landers recorded the full statement and asked Ethan to list anything she might have taken. Ethan confirmed nothing was missing. Delgado photographed the main areas: front door, hallway, stairs. They checked hardwood floors, rugs, door frames, the kitchen, no unusual marks or blood. The preliminary report noted no signs of forced entry, no crime scene violence. Subject left residence voluntarily. Status unconfirmed. Data was transmitted to Socorro County Dispatch at 10:46 a.m., and a temporary case file was opened under Code 221MA. After finishing inside, Landers and Delgado checked the backyard. The land stretched west into open desert, wind blowing fine sand in layers. They marked the search perimeter, noting wind direction and possible walking paths. On the thick dust, only 2 sets of shoe prints matched Lauren's and Ethan's sizes. No unknown footprints or tire tracks. Landers logged the findings and ordered the scene preserved pending further orders. When finished, he reviewed all details: time, location, initial status. Ethan signed the report, voice hoarse, saying nothing more. By late morning, the patrol car left the neighborhood. The road stretching toward the desert was quiet, only the sound of wind and the faint rattle of windows in the harsh sun. The McKay house returned to thick silence, doors locked. The file Lauren McKay, missing adult, now officially entered into the system. That same afternoon, after the Lauren McKay, missing adult file was entered, the Socorro County Sheriff's Office activated a Level 1 emergency search protocol. The mobilization order went out at 14:10, deploying local search and rescue, K-9 units, and volunteers in the Truth or Consequences area. Lieutenant Don Crane, just arrived from the county office, took command of the scene. He ordered a temporary command center set up at the elementary school sports field, half a mile from the McKay house, large enough for tents, comms vehicles, and rescue gear. Within an hour, more than 30 people were on site: professional search teams, locals, and volunteer firefighters. Topographic maps were spread across a patrol car hood, dividing the area into 5 concentric circles centered on the McKay house with a 5-mile radius. Crane assigned teams: East Residential Zone, West Open Desert, North Elephant Butte Lakeshore, and South along Highway 187. 2 K-9 units from Valencia County were brought in, working off the scent from one of Lauren's jackets taken from the closet. The first team moved out at 15:35 along the dirt path behind the house into the desert. Strong wind and intense sun made tracking nearly impossible. Sand erased footprints within minutes. Teams walked in grid lines, evenly spaced, scanning the ground. After more than 2 hours, they reported no suspicious findings. The Northern Lakeshore team checked campsites, trails, abandoned tents, no unknown vehicles or personal items. Another team walked Highway 187, stopping at rest areas and gas stations. Security cameras showed no sign of Lauren the previous night. By 18 o'clock, as temperatures dropped, Crane ordered everyone back to the command center for debrief. Each team marked searched areas on the map: red pins for desert, blue for residential, yellow for lake areas. More than 12 square miles had been covered with no significant discoveries. The K-9 sauced the scent less than half a mile out, near the western fence of the McKay property. Techs noted constantly shifting winds that day made scent retention nearly impossible. Crane ordered a recheck around the fence line, panoramic photos, and soil samples from any darker patches. As the last light faded behind the Caballo Mountains, teams returned with logs, GPS coordinates, and collected items: an old soda can, plastic bag scraps, a torn fabric glove, nothing of evidentiary value. The consolidated report read: no physical evidence, recovered direction of travel, undetermined. Crane drew a black boundary around the 5-mile searched zone, noting Phase 1 search, completed, negative results. The teams disbanded at 2040. On the drive back, the desert wind still blew down empty streets, covering the fresh tire tracks with a thin layer of dust. After the first search phase ended without results, Lieutenant Don Crane shifted focus to reconstructing the timeline before Lauren disappeared. Early the next morning, he and 2 detectives began collecting statements from family, neighbors, and co-workers to pin down exact times. At the McKay house, Ethan provided more detail. Lauren left around 9:30 p.m. on March 12th. Wearing a thin gray jacket, light jeans, sneakers, no purse or car keys. She said she'd be back soon. When he checked at midnight, the front door was still locked, the kitchen light on. No sign anyone had come or gone. The statement was logged at 8:15 a.m., marking the first timeline anchor. Next, the team interviewed neighbor Judy Hall, who had seen Lauren taking out trash that afternoon. She saw nothing unusual on the 12th, only remembered hearing wind and the McKay's wooden door slam around 9 p.m. Across the street, Jim Carter said. When he turned off his TV around 10 p.m., he could still see the McKay living room light on through the window, but no one coming or going. Police noted, 21 o'clock, 22 o'clock, lights still on, no direct witnesses. Crane then contacted Lauren's co-workers at Hot Springs Elementary, where she taught 2nd grade. They confirmed she left school normally at 16:20 on the 12th. Another teacher, Maria Owens, had received a short text from Lauren at 19:12, saying, "See you in class tomorrow," considered the last verified contact. Crane requested tech extract phone data to confirm the final message timestamp and cell tower ping. Preliminary results showed the signal came from a tower in the Sunset Drive neighborhood, less than half a mile from the house. No further activity after 21 o'clock. Police also checked surveillance at the nearby Desert Fuel gas station. Footage from 2214 showed two vehicles passing, no match to Lauren's or Ethan's cars. Another witness, Amy Ruiz, a morning workout friend of Lauren's, said she texted Lauren at 2237, but the message never delivered. Cell records showed temporary loss of connection from 2240 onward. Based on these markers, Crane established the critical window as 21 o'clock to 23 o'clock, the 2-hour period where the incident likely occurred. On the temporary board, he drew the timeline and pinned points. 1620 left school, 1912. Last outgoing text, 21 o'clock. Light still on 90-2240 phone signal, lost 23 o'clock. No further network activity, all marked red as verified or partially verified. At the same time, he requested Ethan's phone records to cross-check whether he called anyone or left the area during that window. Ethan's log showed the last outgoing call at 2052 to an old client, with no movement outside the home zone afterward. Crane noted the detail, but drew no conclusion. He also checked streetlight and power company reports. No outages on the night of the 12th. By end of day, all data was entered into the master chart, divided into 3 phases: before leaving home, loss of contact, and post-disappearance. The area map was updated with witness coordinates and distances to the house. Preliminary timeline chart was complete, showing Lauren left under normal circumstances, with no signs of coercion, but vanished completely within the next 2 hours. Lieutenant Crane ended the day at 1905, signing off on the initial report. Timeline established. Subject last verified 21 o'clock, presumed missing between 21 o'clock, 23 o'clock. After completing the reconstruction of the disappearance timeline and establishing the suspected time frame from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., Lieutenant Don Crane expanded the search area beyond the Sunset Drive residential neighborhood. On the morning of March 15th, the coordination center located at the elementary school was relocated to a parking area near Elephant Butte Lake for better oversight of the entire northern section of the town. The topographic map was enlarged, extending the search radius from 5 to 15 miles, encompassing the low hills along the lake and the stretch of Highway 187 connecting Truth or Consequences with Hatch. The search team was divided into 6 groups: 3-foot teams, 1 motorized team, 1 water team, and 1 aerial imaging team. 2 DJI Phantom drones from the New Mexico Rescue Service were deployed, equipped with infrared cameras and GPS positioning, tasked with scanning the semi-desert areas and lake shoreline. Crane directed the K-9 unit to restart from the western fence line of the McKay property, tracking northwest, following the prevailing wind direction from the night of the 12th. The motorized team used all-terrain ATVs to patrol the dirt roads leading to the old campground. Rising midday temperatures made the search difficult. Dry sand and strong winds obscured tracks. By mid-afternoon, one of the drones detected an object reflecting sunlight in an open area, approximately 7 miles from the McKay home. A ground team was dispatched to investigate and found only a shattered piece of glass from a buried warning sign. No signs of a person or new objects. Meanwhile, the water team patrolled the northern lake area, checking wooden bridges, trails, and boat docks, but found nothing related. Teams reported back to the command center hourly, logging GPS coordinates, time, and descriptions of areas covered. By 5:30 p.m., a total of 18 square miles had been searched, including the western desert and the entire perimeter around Elephant Butte Lake. All results were negative. Crane ordered the drones to conduct a final sweep at dusk, using infrared mode to detect unusual heat signatures, but the imagery only showed natural temperature differences between sand, rock, and shallow water. As daylight faded, he called an end to the second day's search. All imaging data was backed up, coded EB215, and stored with the positioning maps. In the end-of-day debrief, the teams agreed that if Lauren had left the house on foot, she would most likely have headed toward Highway 187, where no witnesses or cameras recorded any matching movement during the suspected time frame. Local highway patrol confirmed no accident reports and no sightings of a pedestrian that night. Based on the complete aerial, ground, and residential search results, Crane concluded that the likelihood of the victim voluntarily leaving town was very low. The consolidated report sent to Sierra County Command Headquarters at 8:42 p.m. stated clearly, "No trace, no activity detected. Conditions suggest abnormal disappearance." That wording was sufficient for the Criminal Investigation Unit to request reclassification of the case. On March 16, at 9:15 a.m., Crane signed the official notification to the county sheriff's office. The Lauren McKay case was upgraded from missing adult to suspicious disappearance with possible criminal element. File 221MA was officially elevated to Level 2, requiring the opening of a preliminary criminal investigation. The composite map of the two search operations was posted on the Coordination Center board, with a red border around the victim's home area, a yellow border extending to Elephant Butte Lake, and a black border along Highway 187. The three primary focus zones of the initial phase. As night fell, the last blinking lights of the rescue teams gradually went dark, leaving only the dry desert wind blowing across the scattered markers that defined the boundaries of a disappearance now officially carrying criminal elements. On the morning of March 17th, immediately after the case was upgraded to suspicious disappearance with possible criminal element, Lieutenant Don Crane submitted an application for a full search warrant of the McKay family home. The warrant was approved by the Sierra County Court at 10:28 the same day, based on multiple anomalies, undetermined time of disappearance, negative search results outside the scene, and the fact that both the victim's phone and vehicle remained at the residence. The state forensic team was dispatched from Albuquerque, bringing luminol blood detection spray, ultraviolet lights, fiber collection vacuums, and air analysis equipment. Crane personally directed the operation, ordering the area around 218 Sunset Drive sealed off and yellow crime scene, do not enter. Tape strung up. At 11:35 a.m., the forensic team began work, divided into 3 units. The first unit handled the living room and kitchen, the second examined the second floor, including bedrooms, bathrooms, and stairs, and the third collected environmental samples from the garage, backyard, and fence line. Ethan McKay was present when the warrant was announced and was required to leave the property during the search. The entire house was photographed before work began. In the living room, technicians noted a slight color difference in the hardwood floorboards. The center area appeared lighter than the section near the sofa. Under UV light, several faint blue glowing circular streaks appeared, indicating cleaned areas. Floor samples were taken with cotton swabs and coded LM01. The hallway runner carpet was newly replaced. The fibers were still dust-free and carried a strong rubber odor. Police located a receipt for the new carpet, dated March 14th, 2 days after Lauren's disappearance, from a furniture store in downtown. Beneath the new carpet, at the base of the wall, an old sticky stain had been painted over. Crane ordered a 20-centimeter section cut for testing. In the kitchen, the sink was spotless with no standing water, and the drain carried a strong industrial chlorine smell. Technicians collected residual drain water coded LM07. The countertops were gleaming, though faint scratches along the wooden edge suggested a metal object had been dragged across multiple times. At the back door, the hinges were newly replaced, with bright screws matching product code 2023A from Home Pro. Police noted, door hardware recently replaced, potential concealment of prior damage. Upstairs, the master bedroom was sealed for detailed examination. The bed was neatly made with fresh bedding. Laundry tags were still crisp. Beneath the rug beside the dresser, luminol revealed a small glowing patch approximately 40 centimeters long. Photographs were taken from 3 angles and coded L2B. Outside the window, the wooden frame showed fresh sanding marks with paint still tacky. Crane ordered paint and wood shaving samples collected for timing analysis. The adjacent bathroom contained no hair or biological traces, but fluorescent powder revealed faint handprint streaks on the mirror, moving from inside outward. Technicians photographed and lifted the prints with clear adhesive tape. In the garage, used as a gardening tool storage area, technicians detected a strong mixture of cleaning chemicals and gasoline odor. The concrete floor showed two distinct darker circular stains marked G1 and G2. In the corner were an empty bottle of Solvex 2% paint remover and an empty plastic drum labeled pool cleaner. Nearby lay an unused roll of plastic sheeting and a sealed bag of cement. Crane ordered everything seized as evidence. The backyard was scanned with metal detectors and thermal cameras, nothing abnormal, except a freshly filled patch of soil near the fence, approximately 2 square meters in size. Technicians recorded coordinates and took multi-angle photos. Upon completion, all samples were sealed in 12 evidence bags, signed by the scene commander. The preliminary report highlighted 3 suspicious elements: carpet replacement shortly after the disappearance, heavy use of cleaning chemicals in multiple areas, and paint repair marks inconsistent with the home's maintenance history. At 6:25 p.m., Crane signed the log with a final note: multiple indications of post-event cleaning activity. Further, laboratory testing required. The McKay house was temporarily sealed and placed under Sierra County Sheriff's Department surveillance until lab results were complete. As the team left the scene, the sun had dropped behind the Caballo Mountains, darkness settling over the desert, the yellow tape fluttering in the dry wind like a boundary line between false calm and something just beginning to emerge from the sand. Once the house search report was finalized and samples sent to the lab, Lieutenant Don Crane shifted focus to cross-referencing Ethan McKay's statements with the physical evidence collected over the previous 3 days. Previously, Ethan had stated that on the evening of March 12, he stayed home with the 3 children and never left after Lauren walked out. Around 9:30 p.m., he said he went upstairs to check around midnight, saw she wasn't back, then fell asleep until morning. However, Crane believed details in the account were inconsistent. Ethan's cell phone data, extracted under court order, showed his device disconnected from the home Wi-Fi at 10:47 p.m. and reconnected at 12:19 a.m., indicating a roughly 2-hour period when the phone was outside the house's range. Cell tower logs recorded a brief ping from the Highway 187 area, approximately 6 miles southwest of the McKay residence, within the same time window. Ethan explained he may have stepped onto the porch or checked the doors, causing signal loss, but the geographic distance to the tower indicated actual movement. Crane ordered review of traffic cameras at the intersection of Highway 187 and Intercity Route 51 near the Desert Fuel gas station. Footage, extracted from 10:58 p.m., showed a silver Ford F-150 pickup traveling southbound. The license plate was blurred, but the body style and taillights matched Ethan's vehicle. Registration records confirmed the truck belonged to him. When questioned, Ethan insisted he never drove that night, and the F-150 stayed in the garage, yet forensic photos showed the garage floor freshly cleaned with no tire dust, indicating the truck had recently been washed. Another inconsistency concerned his stated bedtime. Ethan claimed he went upstairs at 11:30 p.m., but the kitchen wall clock examined had stopped at 12:07 due to a weak battery, suggesting he remained downstairs longer. Smart home devices, including the backyard light timer, recorded the lights being turned off manually at 12:26 a.m. after he claimed to be asleep. Crane marked this timestamp on the behavioral timeline. When asked about the discrepancies, Ethan replied that he didn't remember exactly due to stress and lack of sleep. Additionally, the furniture store receipt showed he purchased the new carpet on March 14th, 2 days after the disappearance, paid with his personal credit card. He claimed the reason was old musty odor, but investigators noted the timing and type matched the area where cleaning traces were found. Crane requested store surveillance footage, confirming Ethan arrived alone in the silver F-150 to make the purchase. All data was compiled into a timeline chart. 9:30 p.m. Lauren leaves house. 10:47 p.m. Ethan's phone leaves Wi-Fi range. 10:58 p.m. Ford recorded on Highway 187. 12:19 a.m. device reconnects to home network. 12:26 a.m. backyard lights turned off. This sequence indicated that during a roughly 2.5-hour window, Ethan likely left and returned before dawn. Police also checked credit card transaction history, no purchases outside the home, reinforcing that he did not travel to another residential area. Crane made no formal accusation, but in his report to the Socorro County Sheriff's Office, he concluded, "Subject exhibits timeline inconsistencies, probable movement during critical hours." Furthermore, the carpet replacement, repainting of the door frame, and heavy use of cleaning chemicals shortly after the incident were regarded as potential evidence concealment. Based on the totality of technical data and inconsistent statements, Ethan McKay was placed under special monitoring. Crane requested the surveillance unit begin discreet tracking and moved his behavioral file to person of interest. At the end of the report, he noted in bold, "Timeline verification complete. Subject statements inconsistent with recorded data." The line was stamped and signed, marking a new phase for Case 221 MA. After completing the cross-check of Ethan's statements against his cell phone data, Lieutenant Don Crane shifted focus to analyzing Lauren's phone to determine her final direction of travel. The device had been seized from the home on the first day of the missing person report, but full extraction was only now possible after a court-approved unlock order. The State Police Digital Forensics Unit recovered the complete call log, messages, location history, and cell tower access records. The summary showed Lauren's phone functioned normally throughout March 12. Calls, texts, and network access were steady until 9:03 p.m. After that time, there were no further outgoing or incoming communications. The final cell tower ping connected to Tower TCS 187, located along Highway 187, approximately 6 miles southwest of the McKay home. The exact same area where Ethan's phone signal appeared between 10:47 p.m. and 12:19 a.m. Internal GPS data, automatically backed up via Google location services, showed the last recorded coordinates at 32,831 degree N, 107, 2,869 degree W at 9:41 p.m. When Crane overlaid the location maps of both devices, the overlap zone was less than half a mile apart. This was the first indication that Lauren may have left the Sunset Drive area that night, not voluntarily, but transported. For verification, Crane ordered comparison of cell signal history with toll data and cameras along Highway 187. A security camera at the Desert Fuel Station, the same one that captured Ethan's F-150, recorded headlights at 9:48 p.m., shining southbound. The plate was unreadable, but the light pattern and height matched a pickup truck. No pedestrians or other vehicles were visible. Based on tower density and signal dropout timing, technicians reconstructed a linear signal map: 9:03 p.m. loss of network contact, 9:41 p.m. final ping on Highway 187. 10:47 p.m. Ethan's device leaves Wi-Fi range, 12:19 a.m. his signal returns home. These data points showed spatial and temporal overlap, strengthening suspicion that both devices were present in the same area. The forensics lab also discovered a brief Bluetooth connection from Lauren's phone to the Ford vehicle system between 9:34 p.m. and 9:36 p.m., automatically logged when an unfamiliar device paired. The identifier matched LM_88, her phone. Crane ordered the vehicle's memory module sealed for further examination, but noted this as technical evidence that Lauren's phone had been inside the F-150's cabin. Continuing network data analysis, technicians recovered a final Google timeline packet showing the device moving at an average speed of 45 km per h for 3 minutes before complete disconnection, heading south. After 9:43 p.m., the phone emitted no further signals, presumed powered off or battery depleted. Crane designated the signal loss area as primary gap zone, approximately 2 square miles between the main highway and empty land west of Elephant Butte Lake. He immediately cross-referenced the topographic map and identified 3 small dirt roads branching from Highway 187 into undeveloped desert, one leading to a cluster of private cabins dating from the 1980s. These coordinates were logged for subsequent expanded searches. In the March 18th technical report, Crane summarized the findings. Lauren's phone left home network range at the same time as Ethan's. Final tower ping matched Highway 187. Bluetooth connection confirmed presence inside the F-150. GPS data showed a short southward journey before disconnect. Experts assessed the likelihood of the victim being transported by motor vehicle as very high. In the conclusion section, Crane wrote, "All electronic data converges on single route segment, Highway 187 corridor, subject likely transported between 21:30, 22 o'clock. He ordered all raw data backed up to the central server under code 221 CT and created a diagram linking time, coordinates, and vehicle." Leaving the tech lab, Crane paused before the large Sierra County map where red markers formed a thin curving line from the McKay house to Highway 187 before vanishing into empty sand. He underlined the report's final note in thick marker: direction of movement, west to southwest, presumed vehicle assisted. From that evidence, the investigation's primary direction was redefined, now centered on the hypothesis that Lauren McKay had been removed from the residential area that night in her husband's own vehicle. Immediately after the cell phone data and tower pings from Lauren McKay pinpointed the final coordinates along Highway 187, Lieutenant Don Crane ordered a third ground search, focusing on the primary gap zone, a stretch of land more than 2 square miles wide, lying between the highway and the open sandy area west of Elephant Butte Lake. On the morning of March 19th, a 16-person search team was mobilized, divided into 4 groups, each consisting of field officers, technicians, and 1 K-9 handler. A temporary command post was set up at the Desert Fuel gas station, the last location with extracted traffic camera footage. Maps of the area were spread across the bed of a pickup truck, with coordinates 32, 8,831 degree N, and 107, 2,869 degree W marked as the central point. The morning temperature was barely above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, but strong desert winds made it difficult to maintain search grid lines. Crane led the first team westward, following a faint dirt track once used by material hauling trucks. About 800 meters from Highway 187, one of the canines alerted and barked toward a human head-high sand mound. When they dug just below the surface, they uncovered a white plastic zip tie, approximately 20 centimeters long, its ratchet end stretched as if it had been pulled tight with force. Crane immediately sealed the item in an evidence bag, labeled 221RZ1, and marked the GPS coordinates. A few meters away, a technician located a blue latex glove, lightly dusted with sand, wedged between 2 dry rocks. Inside, there was a dark streak at the wrist area, unclear whether it was soil or something else. The second item was tagged 221GV2. Both objects were photographed, preliminarily swabbed, and transported to the evidence vehicle for preservation. The search team continued sweeping the area in an expanding spiral pattern, maintaining 15-meter intervals between members. Any object that stood out by color was examined. In addition to the first 2 items, they recovered a small piece of nylon fabric and an old length of paracord. There were no signs of human remains or a vehicle. The second K-9 team checked the northern section of the zone, but registered no significant reaction. By midday, the entire 2-square-mile area had been covered, and Crane called a halt for debriefing. 4 evidence bags were sealed and sequentially labeled in order of discovery, then transported to the Sierra County Forensic Lab. On the way back, he stopped at the nearby traffic checkpoint to question night shift employees, but none reported seeing any suspicious vehicles on the night of March 12. At 15:10, the team returned to the coordination center, uploaded GPS data and scene photos, and prepared a detailed report. In the lab, the items were processed the same day. The zip tie was examined for fingerprints and epithelial cells, but due to surface oxidation and prolonged environmental exposure, no intact DNA profile was recovered. The latex glove was examined under ultraviolet light, revealing a few faint glowing spots on the fingertips that were swabbed. Preliminary results showed only decomposed organic matter insufficient for individual identification. The nylon fragment and paracord contained no biological traces, only common synthetic fibers. The forensic report returned to Crane the next morning stated clearly, no usable DNA profiles recovered, material environmentally degraded. Despite the unfavorable results, he ordered all samples stored in the evidence locker for possible future reanalysis with new technology. During an internal briefing that afternoon, Crane assessed that the primary gap zone still held tactical value because the overlap between the phone coordinates and the location of the recovered items suggested possible vehicle movement or a stop there on the night of the disappearance. He directed the mapping unit to reconstruct wind direction and terrain conditions for the night of March 12 based on weather data, southwesterly winds at 18 miles per hour. Temperature 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Conditions ideal for erasing traces within hours. In the fading afternoon light across the desert, Crane studied the map covered with crisscrossing lines running from the McKay residence to Highway 187 and looping south toward the freshly searched area. He added the final note to the log, field search completed, no physical remains. Evidence indicates temporary vehicle stop, probable object disposal. As the last patrol vehicle pulled away from the desert fuel station, dusk was falling. The wind still blew along the power poles lining Highway 187, carrying fine dust that covered every trace they had just uncovered. After the Highway 187 area ground search yielded no definitive remains, but the recovered items, despite lacking usable DNA, led Lieutenant Don Crane to believe the victim may have been transported by vehicle. Using supporting materials, he ordered the investigation expanded to include Ethan McKay's financial and purchasing activity in the days before and after Lauren's disappearance. The Digital Forensics Unit, working with local banks, reviewed Ethan's complete March 2013 credit card and bank account history. The transaction report revealed two notable purchases: March 10, $64.80 at Home Pro in downtown. March 14, $124.30 at Desert Supply Building Materials, located near Highway 51. Electronic receipts retrieved from Home Pro listed a carpet knife, latex gloves, and Solvex paint remover. At Desert Supply, the purchased items included two 50-pound bags of Portland cement, one 10x 15-foot polyethylene tarp, and three 2x4 lumber pieces. This transaction occurred just 2 days after Lauren vanished, coinciding with the time the crime scene unit discovered the newly replaced carpet and signs of cleaning in the house. Crane noted these details in the file, flagging them indirect evidence, material purchase post-incident. He requested security footage from Desert Supply to confirm the buyer. Extracted surveillance video showed that at 9:42 a.m. on March 14, a man wearing a green shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap exited the store carrying items matching the receipt. The visible portion of the license plate read 9C72, matching the last three characters of Ethan McKay's Ford F-150. Police saved the still images, copied the frames, and added them to the digital evidence file. When brought in for questioning, Ethan admitted visiting Desert Supply, but claimed he bought the materials to repair the garage floor and build shelving in the backyard shed. He insisted the carpet replacement, tarps, and cement were simply routine maintenance. However, Crane noted that county property tax records showed no registered accessory construction at the McKay residence during that period, suggesting the materials may have served another purpose. He cross-referenced bank data and discovered that on the same day, March 14, Ethan also withdrew $200 cash from an ATM near the store, with no accompanying receipts. A 2-week review of transactions from March 10, 24, revealed no other anomalies, but the material purchases tightly bracketing Lauren's disappearance were considered highly suspicious. Crane compiled a list of circumstantial evidence consisting of one cement and tarp receipt dated 3/14, two carpet knife and cleaner receipt dated 3/10, 3 store surveillance stills, 4 image of Ethan's Ford F-150 at the purchase location, 5 timing of purchases aligning with the investigation window. Everything was coded under file, 221 fin, and forwarded to the crime lab for material source confirmation. Initial lab analysis found that residual cement in the garage had a mineral composition similar to Portland cement produced at the Desert Supply Plant, but since it was a common product, exclusive sourcing was impossible. Crane marked the result inconclusive. After nearly a week of review, investigators found no purchases, proving Ethan bought materials before March 10, meaning all listed items were acquired within the 4-day window surrounding the disappearance. Although the transaction chain raised strong suspicion, no direct evidence linked the materials to the commission of a crime or scene concealment. In his report to the Sierra County Sheriff's Office, Crane concluded, financial activity consistent with concealment behavior but lacks direct linkage to victim. The phrase was highlighted in red in the file to emphasize suspicion without sufficient grounds for charges. He ordered continued monitoring of Ethan's personal and business finances in subsequent months and archived all receipts and image copies in Digital Evidence Vault 3. When the report was complete, Crane closed the nearly 1-inch thick folder and placed it with the other evidence items. The fluorescent office light reflected off the cover text, Case 221 and indirect financial correlation, evidence pending confirmation, closing the suspect's financial review phase with a concise finding clear signs of irregularity, but still insufficient evidence to charge. After completing the financial review phase without obtaining direct incriminating evidence, Lieutenant Don Crane held a summary meeting with the Sierra County Sheriff's Office to evaluate the entire investigation progress. The consolidated report exceeded 30 pages, detailing every action taken since March 13, ground searches, cell signal analysis, evidence collection, financial review, and forensic results. The overall conclusion stated there was no body, no confirmatory DNA, no eyewitnesses, and no provable criminal evidence that would hold up in court. The only physical traces, the zip tie and glove, had been environmentally destroyed, while electronic and financial data remained purely circumstantial. The county prosecutor's office declined to issue an arrest warrant due to lack of proof of malicious intent or foul play. Ethan McKay remained under surveillance, but was neither charged nor restricted in movement. After 3 straight months of active investigation, the Sierra County Field Investigation Unit's budget dwindled, forcing non-progressing cases to be considered for transfer. On July 2, 2013, Crane signed the memo recommending transfer of the missing person, Lauren McKay, filed to the Cold Case Unit Valencia's Unsolved Missing Persons section, located in Los Lunas, and specializing in long-term disappearances lacking biological evidence. Before transfer, he ordered a final evidence vault review, the 4 bags of material from the Highway 187 area, phone data copies, surveillance images, purchase receipts, and forensic reports were resealed and labeled evidentiary integrity. Checked. Hard drives containing GPS and network data were duplicated, 1 copy accompanying the file, 1 retained at the Sierra Data Center. The case closure memo stated, case status, unresolved, no further leads. Recommendation, administrative closure pending new evidence. On July 5, the file was officially recoded as 13221 VLC and handed over to the Valencia Cold Case Center. Physical evidence was transported in a sealed evidence van with triple locks and dual signature chain of custody forms. The handover was quiet, with no media present and only 4 attendees, including Crane. As he signed the final line, he paused briefly at the note, victim presumed missing, foul play undetermined. No one in the room said another word. The case was thereafter classified inactive, meaning all proactive investigation ceased until new developments arose. Ethan McKay left town a few weeks later, sold his small store in downtown Truth or Consequences, and relocated to Albuquerque. The 2 families ceased all contact, and the McKay house remained shuttered for years. In county statistical reports, Lauren McKay's disappearance was listed only as missing adult, suspicious circumstance, ranked 14th among 22 unsolved cases for 2013. By late August, the complete file was archived in the Valencia Cold Case Warehouse, shelved with older cases inside cold steel racks, bearing the faint red stamp, status inactive. No further meetings were held, no additional field budget allocated. A disappearance that once stirred a small desert town in New Mexico had become a dormant file. No body, no traces, no resolution. After the Lauren McKay case was officially transferred to the Valencia Cold Case Unit, all evidence storage procedures followed New Mexico regulations for unresolved cases. On July 8, 2013, the physical items, scene photos, search warrants, and digital data were placed in the unit's secure vault in Los Lunas. Each evidence bag received a red seal bearing the signatures of Lieutenant Don Crane and receiving technician Harold Timmons of the Cold Case Unit. Items were individually numbered 221RZ, 221GV2, 221RZ, 4, plus 2 hard drives containing phone and camera data backups. Physical items were placed in clear plastic boxes and stored in cold vault hash 2, section Southwest unresolved cases, maintained at 57 degrees Fahrenheit to minimize oxidation. Digital evidence was backed up to a 256-bit encrypted server, accessible only via internal terminals. Per Memo 14.7 VLC, the McKay file was classified limited evidence. Biological undetermined, meaning biological value was unconfirmed, and the case did not qualify for priority retesting. Due to budget and technology limitations at the time, the Valencia lab lacked high-degradation sequencing equipment, so further testing was suspended. The county crime lab had once recommended sending samples to the Santa Fe State Lab for advanced analysis, but the request was denied because costs exceeded the allowance for an inactive case. Ultimately, the samples remained sealed with the note, reserved for potential future DNA reprocessing. Between 2014 and 2018, the McKay file was inspected only during routine 6-month administrative checks. Technician Timmons' January 2015 evidence report stated, "Condition stable, packaging intact. No sign of degradation exceeding baseline." This confirmed all items remained well preserved with no intervention required. Scene photos and cell tower maps were duplicated on paper and filed in physical folder 7B, the cabinet for disappearances with no recovered victim. Hard drives were labeled anti-copy, wax-sealed, and stored in a small safe with other Class E, suspicious missing cases. Over 5 years, the file was opened only twice, during standard audits in 2015 and 2017, when the Valencia Cold Case Unit conducted inventory. The 2017 report confirmed all seals intact and no items missing. The case appeared on the June inventory list, alongside 78 other backlogged files marked pending reassessment, low priority. In addition to the paper file, digital records were maintained by periodically migrating to new drives to prevent data loss. However, with no re-examination requests, no technician ever reanalyzed the contents. Each year, in unit statistical reports, the Lauren McKay case merited only a single line, case hash 13221, missing adult. No update. Crane, who had by then transferred to the State Task Force Coordination Unit, continued receiving administrative copies via email and occasionally noted simply unchanged or retain as is. For 5 years, the McKay file existed as a silent punctuation mark among hundreds of unresolved cases. Mute evidence locked in cold storage, dusty scene photos, and the fading cover text, Lauren McKay, missing, March 2013. Evidence held pending further development. No one knew that beneath those silent seals, the samples were waiting for one chance, a technological breakthrough or a single new piece of information that could shatter the wall of time that had held them for 5 long years. In early 2019, 6 years after leaving field work, Lieutenant Don Crane was reassigned to the New Mexico State Police Cold Case Unit, now headquartered in Valencia. During a program to review backlog cases with recoverable evidence potential, the entry Lauren McKay, missing adult, 2013, appeared on the medium priority list because its physical evidence remained intact and stable. Crane, the original lead investigator, immediately took notice, when code 13221 VLC showed up on the roster. He requested the entire evidence box be pulled from cold storage for condition inspection. When the archivist broke the seals for the first time in 5 years, the bags were still perfect: zip tie, latex glove, nylon scrap, and paracord segment. All were well preserved with no significant degradation. Crane reread his own 2013 handwritten note, preserved for potential future DNA reprocessing. What had been mere administrative wording in 2013 was now the reason to reopen the case. In the intervening 6 years, DNA testing had advanced dramatically with touch DNA technology, capable of extracting genetic material from the tiniest remaining skin cells on an object's surface. Crane drafted an 8-page proposal to the cold case chief, requesting reactivation of the McKay file based on the viability of this new method. The report outlined why the evidence remained usable and legally valuable if DNA were obtained: stable storage conditions, minimal surface disturbance, and direct geographic link to the disappearance site. He argued that even without a body or witnesses, touch DNA could provide the breakthrough in cases previously impossible to profile biologically. In late March 2019, the Valencia Cold Case Review Board met to evaluate 24 proposed retesting candidates. The McKay case was placed in Priority Group 1 because the evidence was intact, chain of custody unbroken, and samples free of cross-contamination. Crane briefed the board on the original investigation, stressing the connection between the Highway 187 evidence and Ethan McKay's purchases. He contended that retesting could finally determine whether Lauren's DNA, or a second person's, was present on the zip tie and glove. Following the meeting, the board approved reactivation and signed the order to reopen file 13221 VLC. On April 5, the evidence was transported to the state-of-the-art forensic lab in Albuquerque, one of the first facilities in New Mexico to implement large-scale touch DNA processing. The new protocol could isolate cells from surfaces that had merely been touched, sometimes requiring only a few cells for identification. Crane was present on intake day, signing the transfer log alongside lead technician Ella Montrose. Together, they verified each bag's seals, then opened them under sterile conditions. The zip tie was processed first. The ratchet end and body were swabbed separately to prevent cross-contamination. The latex glove followed, with focus on the palm interior and wrist area, regions of highest probable skin contact. While Montrose operated the centrifuge and extraction equipment, Crane watched the monitor display sample processing, trace DNA extraction. He knew this was the first time since 2013 that the McKay evidence was being examined with technology capable of producing real results. By late April, initial processing was complete. The preliminary report revealed that 2 of the items contained detectable biological trace in the form of very low-level skin cells, sufficient for profiling. The nylon and paracord yielded nothing significant. Crane noted, partial epidermal cells located, potential for profile generation. With these findings, the McKay file officially left inactive status and entered active forensic reassessment. The lab scheduled full STR sequencing the following month, using STR mix software for comparison against the National CODIS database. When Crane signed the reactivation confirmation, he knew everything was different now. No longer a forgotten disappearance in cold storage, but a resurrected investigation brought back to life by the very samples that had lain silent for 6 long years. By early May 2019, the forensics lab in Albuquerque completed the next-generation sequencing of the samples extracted using touch DNA technology. The report sent back to the Valencia Cold Case Unit was more than 30 pages long, with the conclusion section highlighted by the words, "Mixed DNA profile detected." The results showed that on the zip tie labeled 221RZ1, there were 2 distinct DNA sources. One matched the biological profile of Lauren McKay that had been stored in the state database from when she was still alive, and the other matched Ethan McKay's DNA obtained in 2013, when he had been sampled as a person of interest during the initial investigation. This was the first time in 6 years that physical evidence confirmed direct contact between the victim and her husband in the time frame surrounding her disappearance. The portion of the zip tie where Lauren's trace was found showed a genetic match ratio of 1 in 58 trillion, ruling out random coincidence. Meanwhile, the main body of the tie yielded Ethan's trace, weaker but still within the statistical threshold for confirmation. These results eliminated the possibility of accidental transfer because there was no plausible reason for both of their DNA to be present on an object found 6 miles from their home, in the exact area where Lauren's cell phone signal went dead for the last time. Crane read every page of the report in silence, feeling a heavy mixture of dread and vigilance. He ordered one additional cross-check to ensure the integrity of the chain of custody and to confirm there were no errors in the collection process. After technician Montrose signed off, the report was forwarded to cold case leadership. At the same time, the nylon fabric fragment labeled 221NY3, previously considered biologically worthless, was reprocessed using a hemoglobin reaction solution. Under ultraviolet light, Montrose detected a dark band along the edge that gave a weak positive reaction. When examined under a microscope, the sample clearly showed the characteristic ferritin crystals of heavily oxidized human blood, rust brown in color, deeply embedded in the synthetic fibers. Chemical analysis confirmed it was human blood residue, no longer intact enough for individualization, but sufficient to prove the item had contacted bodily fluid. The technical report noted, oxidized human blood residue, origin undetermined. For Crane, that discovery alone was enough to reactivate the entire file. He immediately convened a meeting with the cold case unit chief and the special prosecutor assigned to missing persons reinvestigations, presenting the mixed DNA results and the blood evidence. In the minutes of the May 9th meeting, Crane recommended changing the case status from forensic review to reinvestigation. The prosecutor agreed, citing Section 32(1) of the New Mexico Code of Criminal Procedure, when new scientific evidence is capable of establishing criminal conduct or identifying the responsible party, the case shall be reopened. At exactly 2:20 p.m. that day, the official order to reopen File 13221 VLC was signed, and notices were sent to the entire National CODIS database system, simultaneously updating the case status to active homicide suspected. Crane ordered the restoration of all original 2013 reports, cross-referencing timelines, cell phone data, and financial records. He also requested re-examination of secondary evidence items, the gloves, parachute cord, and cement samples collected from the McKay garage. Under this new lens, everything once dismissed as speculation now carried clear meaning. The purchase patterns, the carpet replacement, and the location where the items were found now formed a deliberate behavioral pattern. By mid-May, the lab completed the final consolidated report. The first page stated, Item 221RZ1, mixed DNA, contributor A, contributor B. Item 221NY3, positive for human blood. Recommendation, classify as potential crime scene evidence. The report was accompanied by microscopic photographs and allele frequency charts. When the documents were printed, Crane stood silently staring at the header line, dry numbers that weighed like a verdict. 6 years earlier, he had signed the closure because of no evidence of foul play. Now he was signing the opposite document, confirming grounds to reopen the case as a criminal investigation. On May 15th, the cold case unit held an internal press briefing announcing the results. The 2013 disappearance of Lauren McKay was officially reopened with new developments from mixed DNA analysis and oxidized blood traces. Crane wrote in his duty log, 6 years of silence broken by one fragment of plastic, along with the decision to reevaluate, the McKay file was elevated to state-level investigation status, opening a new phase in which every previous assumption would have to be re-examined in the light of evidence that had finally spoken after 6 years buried in Valencia's cold storage. Once the DNA results were released and the case officially reopened, Lieutenant Don Crane immediately proposed the next investigative step: a complete review of all property ever titled to Ethan McKay before and after the disappearance, with the goal of locating any site that might have been used to conceal or dispose of a body. The Cold Case Unit's financial analysis team, working with the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department, discovered that in addition to the main house in Truth or Consequences, Ethan had once owned a small cabin in Socorro County, approximately 90 miles north. That property had not appeared on the asset list he provided investigators in 2013 because ownership had been temporarily transferred to a friend, Travis Bourne, just 2 months after Lauren vanished. The cabin sat on remote land bordering the Rio Salado Desert, accessible via County Road 52, an area with virtually no residents, only scattered old vacation homes and abandoned ranches. Records at the Socorro County Clerk's Office showed the cabin was originally permitted in 2011, but the concrete foundation was not completed until March 2013 under a repair permit, listing Ethan himself as the contractor. That timeline perfectly matched the period of Lauren's disappearance and the days Ethan purchased cement and plastic sheeting. Crane closely examined the construction drawings and found a subcontractor note that read new poured floor, 12 by 14 feet, reinforced concrete. The report included invoices from Desert Supply, the exact same store Ethan visited on March 14, 2013. On the strength of these coincidences, Crane designated the Socorro cabin for field survey and classified it as property with potential direct case relevance. He immediately sent a coordination request to the Socorro County Sheriff's Office and applied for an administrative inspection warrant to avoid trespass issues. Old paperwork showed Ethan sold the cabin to Travis Bourne in 2014 for a nominal $4,000, but the contract was never notarized, only hand-signed. Bourne, now living in Arizona, told detectives he had never visited the property since taking title and that Ethan had kept the keys until 2016. Bourne described the cabin as deep in the sand, with no electricity, water, or caretaker, and said he was unsure of its current condition. When Crane heard that, he classified it as an uncontrolled location for years, ideal conditions for concealing evidence or remains without detection. On May 22, 2019, he briefed the cold case team and proposed placing the Socorro cabin on the priority survey list. Topographic maps were printed, and Ethan's 2013 travel routes overlaid. Cell data showed his phone had intermittently pinged a tower near Magdalena, a small town between Truth or Consequences and Socorro, on the morning of March 13, just hours after Lauren was reported missing. When Crane plotted the maps, the cabin was less than 20 miles from that route, reachable by pickup truck in about 30 minutes. He added this information to the master report and labeled the cabin Point of Interest #1. At the end of May, the Cold Case Unit submitted a request to the state prosecutor for a limited search warrant allowing survey of the Socorro County property for evidence related to the McKay case. While awaiting the warrant, Crane continued reviewing property tax records and discovered the cabin had gone 3 years without taxes paid and was listed as abandoned, meaning law enforcement could legally access it under public safety authority. On June 3, he and the geotechnical technician received detailed maps from the Department of Transportation, including satellite imagery showing the cabin foundation in a low-lying area surrounded by low brush and sandstone outcrops. A 2018 grayscale photo revealed the roof had partially collapsed, but the concrete slab remained intact and highly reflective. Crane circled the area and wrote by hand, "Concrete slab poured March 2013, verify subsurface integrity." For the first time in 6 years, he felt the scattered pieces of the case beginning to form a clear picture. The Socorro cabin was not just a forgotten property, it was a physical trace that perfectly matched the timeline, materials, and behavior of the husband during the critical window. In that day's investigative log, Crane wrote briefly, "Cabin identified, owned, modified, and possibly utilized by suspect during disappearance timeframe. Field survey required. The asset review had led him to a new turning point in the case, opening the first field investigation since 2013. On June 10, 2019, after completing all necessary legal procedures, Lieutenant Don Crane and the cold case technical team traveled to Socorro County to survey the abandoned cabin formerly owned by Ethan McKay. The primary equipment deployed was a latest generation GSSI utility, scan ground penetrating radar, GPR system, capable of scanning up to 8 feet deep in concrete and hard-packed soil. The four-person team consisted of Crane, geotechnical engineer Raymond Cota, forensic technician Ella Montrose, and field officer Thomas Laird, who secured the perimeter. The cabin stood isolated nearly 2 miles off County Road 52, without power or water, its wooden roof rotted, and the concrete foundation cracked. The dry heat of the Rio Salado made the ground hard as rock. Every footstep echoed hollowly. Crane set up a security cordon, marked a 20x 20-foot grid around the cabin, and cleared brush, weeds, and broken lumber to fully expose the concrete slab. The GPR unit was calibrated to 400 MHz for optimal resolution in the roughly 6-foot thick foundation layer. Laird lightly misted the surface with water to improve wave reflection. As scanning began, the monitor displayed radargrams in bands of blue, yellow, and red, indicating varying subsurface densities. For the first 15 minutes, the returns were relatively uniform, except for minor cracks. When the unit passed over the southwest corner, near the collapsed wall section, Cota noticed an anomalous elliptical red band at approximately 4 feet below the surface. The feature measured roughly 1.5 meters long by 0.7 meters wide and reflected waves far more strongly than surrounding material. He immediately rescanned at lower frequency to rule out error, but the result was identical. The radargram showed 2 parallel high-amplitude returns characteristic of a dense mass in lower-density soil, possibly additional concrete or a buried solid object. Montrose paused recording, saved the data, and marked GPS coordinates, 33, 7,824 degree N, 106, 9,401 degree W. 3 additional passes from different angles confirmed the anomaly at the same 4-foot depth, indicating it was neither natural bedrock nor a typical void. Crane ordered the surrounding area scanned an extra 10 feet in every direction. Results showed the slab averaged 8 inches thick, except at the anomaly, where thickness increased to nearly 18 inches, suggesting a second pour had been added to conceal something. He noted in the field report, anomalous mass detected under slab SW quadrant, approx. 4 feet deep, shape irregular, likely man-made. After completing the GPR survey, Crane had a tent erected to block direct sunlight that could distort thermal imaging and called in a magnetometer cross-check. The flux gate gradiometer registered a slight magnetic increase over the anomaly, consistent with metal or man-made material. These data strengthened the hypothesis of subsurface tampering. While the technicians wrote up notes, Crane stood quietly studying the color radar map, uniform blue across the slab except for one dense red patch in the southwest corner, like an old wound hidden away. He ordered 3D photographs of the entire cabin and a relative position diagram of the anomaly. Cota stated that given the depth and density, the mass could not be old plumbing or footings. The most likely scenario was an excavated pit, later backfilled with cement and sand. When Crane cross-referenced timelines, he noted the foundation repair permit was issued March 16, 2013, 3 days after Lauren was reported missing, and listed Ethan as contractor. Every piece of data pointed in one direction. He immediately phoned Valencia with the discovery and requested an emergency excavation warrant. The state prosecutor's office required the radar maps, GPR images, and technical memo, and signed field affidavit. Crane and Montrose spent 3 hours finalizing the electronic package and transmitting it via secure network. By 9 p.m. that evening, the prosecutor confirmed the file met criteria for evidence of concealed human remains. The Socorro County Court received the application at 8:10 a.m. the next morning and approved controlled forensic excavation effective for 72 hours. Crane held the freshly signed order. The judge's ink still wet. The final line reading, authorization granted for forensic excavation at property identified as McKay Cabin, Section 4, Township 2S. He folded the paper, slipped it into his shirt pocket, and looked out at the desert heating up under the rising sun. 6 years earlier, every trace had vanished with Lauren McKay. Now, beneath the cracked concrete of an abandoned cabin, radar had revealed one solitary dense red mass, an anomaly 4 feet down that might finally be the answer he had waited 6 years to find. On the morning of June 13, 2019, under supervision of the Socorro County prosecutor and the New Mexico Office of the Medical Investigator, Lieutenant Don Crane executed the excavation order at Ethan McKay's former cabin. The site was sealed within a 100-meter radius with shade tents, yellow tape, and a combined cold case and forensic archaeology team. Excavation began at 8:15 a.m. Temperature already neared 95 degrees Fahrenheit, wind whipping sand across the cracked slab. The cabin was divided into 4 x 4-foot grid squares, with initial focus on the southwest corner, where GPR had flagged the anomaly. Concrete was cut in rectangular sections using diamond blade saws, each cut performed slowly to avoid damaging anything below. When the first slab section was lifted, dry compacted soil was exposed with an odd moist odor. Under portable lights, Montrose noted the soil layer was non-uniform, darker and structurally distinct from surrounding earth. Each inch was removed with steel trowels and documented by photograph and coordinate. At approximately 4 feet, matching radar depth, a trowel struck something hard. Laird paused, brushed lightly, and the entire team froze as a dull white nylon sheet emerged, adhered to the dry soil. Further careful digging revealed the nylon extended in an oval shape with the clear outline of a human body beneath. Crane ordered all machinery stopped and forensic anthropologists to continue by hand. For 3 straight hours, soil was removed layer by layer. At 1:47 p.m., the remains were fully defined, a female lying on her right side, wrapped in 3 layers of white nylon sheeting, secured with plastic zip ties. The same type recovered in 2013, the head pointed east, knees slightly drawn up, neck area wrapped with an additional separate nylon layer. No coffin or other container was present. Every step was continuously video recorded. Each contact with the remains was signed and time-stamped. When the first nylon layer was peeled back, the smell of dry decomposition, mixed with earth, filled the air. Bone fragments remained relatively articulated, indicating the dry, sealed environment had slowed decay. Montrose made a preliminary determination of female approximate height, 5'6", consistent with Lauren McKay. Beneath the wrapping, the body wore jeans and a thin silver-gray sweater. A metal button at the waist still bore the engraved initials, LM, the same clothing Ethan had described her wearing that night. In the surrounding soil, technicians recovered a silver ring, 2 long hairs caught in nylon folds, and a broken button. All items were sealed on-site as 221 RC1 through RC5. The remains were surfaced at 4:30 p.m., placed in a sealed body bag, and transported directly to the central lab in Albuquerque. Crane rode in the escort vehicle the entire 2+ hours without speaking. At the OME facility, Dr. Mariah Estrada received the remains, performed full-body X-rays, dental examination, and comparison to Lauren's 2012 dental records. Dental match was perfect, particularly molar #14, with its rare composite filling. Femur DNA was compared to the reference sample from Lauren's mother, stored in the national database, 99.9997% match. The official OME report, signed June 16, 2019, stated, "Identity confirmed as Lauren McKay, female, age 33, missing since March 2013. Cause of death could not be determined due to soft tissue loss, but perimortem ligature marks on cervical vertebrae and wrist bones indicated strong compression from a soft or plastic strap." Crane received the final report that afternoon, stood silently in front of the cold case whiteboard, erased missing person, and wrote homicide investigation. 6 years after the night Lauren vanished, the case was officially reclassified from missing person to homicide. All related agencies were notified. Outstanding witness, financial and behavioral subpoenas related to Ethan McKay from March 12, 2013 were reactivated. Crane ordered full rephotographing and additional analysis of every item recovered from the grave site. That evening, as the team packed up the cabin and the sun set behind the San Mateo Mountains, the last light glinted off the now breached concrete slab and the deep empty pit lined with fresh plastic sheeting. Crane stood holding the identification report, the bold header burned into his mind. Confirmed identification, Lauren McKay. 6 years of searching, hundreds of hours of work, and the answer had lain silent 4 feet beneath the concrete of a forgotten desert cabin. Lauren McKay's disappearance case ended there, but a new, heavier, and irreversible murder investigation had just begun. On June 17, 2019, after completion of the identification process, the body of Lauren McKay was transferred to Forensic Examination Room 3 at the New Mexico office of the medical investigator for a full autopsy to determine the cause of death. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Mariah Estrada personally supervised the procedure, assisted by 2 forensic assistants and a crime scene photographer. The examination began at 8 a.m. and lasted continuously for more than 8 hours. The body was opened in a sterile environment, with every step fully video recorded and photographed in detail by region. The report described the remains as those of an adult female, approximately 167 centimeters in height, with an estimated living weight of 58 kilograms. The body was in a state of dry decomposition, but retained nearly intact skeletal structure due to being tightly wrapped in multiple layers of nylon. No major bone fractures or blunt force trauma were observed. However, the neck and both wrists showed characteristic deformities consistent with compression by a soft ligature. In the neck area, the hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage exhibited compression fractures, with the broken ends displaced inward, typical of death by mechanical asphyxia. Both wrists displayed deep, horizontal grooved abrasions, approximately 8 mm wide, matching the dimensions of the plastic zip tie recovered at the scene. Microscopic examination of the grooves revealed dark staining from early necrosis, confirming the ligature was applied while the victim was still alive. There was no evidence of sharp force injury or thermal damage. Dried blood on the denim fabric around the knees was type O positive, matching Lauren's medical records. Hair samples still adhered to the nylon tested negative for toxins or sedatives, ruling out pre-mortem poisoning. The right wrist remained in a slightly flexed position, indicative of defensive struggle. An old healed crack was noted in the upper left ribs, but was unrelated to the cause of death. Histological findings confirmed acute respiratory failure due to airway obstruction as the primary mechanism, supporting death by mechanical asphyxia. Dr. Estrada's conclusion read, "Cause of death: mechanical asphyxia due to ligature compression of neck." Remaining internal organs, though heavily decomposed, showed no pre-existing pathology or antemortem injury. Soil samples, taken from inside the nylon and beneath the body, revealed insect activity consistent with prolonged burial in hot, dry conditions. Based on soft tissue decomposition and bone mineralization patterns, experts estimated time of death between March 12 and March 14, 2013, exactly matching the date Lauren was reported missing. The report further noted the body had been placed on its right side, wrists bound behind the back, neck tightly ligated with a cord or similar object, then wrapped in multiple layers of nylon and encased in concrete, a combination that significantly slowed decomposition and preserved skeletal detail. Upon completing the 32-page report, Dr. Estrada signed beneath the final line, "Death classified as homicide." Crane received a copy of the autopsy report that same afternoon and sat silently in the small conference room of the cold case unit. 6 years earlier, he had written in the final report that there were no signs of criminal activity, Now every line of the forensic document completely refuted that conclusion. Lauren McKay's death was not a random disappearance, it was deliberate, restrained, and concealed. Crane read each page carefully. The ligature grooves, the hyoid fracture, the time of death matching the night Ethan claimed his wife walked out after an argument. Everything fit together like the bone fragments on the medical examiner's table, reassembling the story. He highlighted 3 key phrases on the printed copy: ligature compression, restrained wrists, and time of death consistent with disappearance. Those words would become the foundation for reclassifying the case from missing person to official homicide investigation. That evening, Crane forwarded the autopsy report, along with all crime scene photographs, to the New Mexico District Attorney's Office. In his cover memorandum he wrote briefly, "The evidence establishes homicidal cause of death, case to be reclassified as homicide and referred for criminal prosecution." The next morning the electronic case file updated with a new status line: case type, homicide, victim, Lauren McKay. Date of death, March 2013. 6 years of silence ended with the cold, clinical conclusion of science. Lauren had not vanished. She had died that very night at the hands of the man who once shared her home. Once the case was officially reclassified as homicide, Lieutenant Don Crane directed the Cold Case Unit's digital forensics team to recover all location and communication data previously seized from the Ford F-150. Used by Ethan McKay in March 2013. During the original investigation, the vehicle's OnStar system had not been accessed due to legal restrictions. By 2019, however, the state agency had a new agreement, allowing retrieval of historical trip data stored on GM servers for up to 10 years. On June 20th, network technician Jacob Rowe accessed General Motors' database under court order and downloaded OnStar log ID hash E4X11327, registered to Ethan's vehicle. The recovered data included full GPS coordinates, engine start-stop times, door openings, and location status for the 48-hour window of March 12, 2013. When plotted on GIS software, Crane saw a clear travel route. The truck left 421 Sunset Drive at 21:32 on March 12. Stopped for 7 minutes at the Desert Fuel gas station at 21:48, then headed northwest, merged onto Highway 187, and continued approximately 85 miles north. Second stop was logged at 23:07 at coordinates 33, 7,825 degree N, 106, 9,400 degree W, the exact location of the Socorro cabin. The engine remained off for 2 hours and 41 minutes before restarting at 1:48 on March 13th and returning south, arriving back in Truth or Consequences at 3:25. This sequence perfectly matched the cell tower pings for Ethan's phone that Crane had collected 6 years earlier. Cross-referencing showed the mobile signal gap from 22:47:019 aligned precisely with the period the OnStar system recorded the truck stationary at the cabin. Lauren's final cell tower ping at 21:41 on Highway 187 placed her on the same route Ethan took just 10 minutes later, forming a logical chain that could not be coincidence. Crane ordered a 3D reconstruction overlaying OnStar data with both phones' tower records. The result showed a single continuous route from the McKay residence past Desert Fuel, along Highway 187, then onto County Road 52 to the Socorro cabin area. The closest divergence between the two devices was 0.4 miles, indicating they traveled together at the same time and direction. For further confirmation, Rowe recovered the truck's ECU log, which recorded RPM and braking patterns. At 23:12, the system registered heavy load mode for 46 seconds, consistent with an unusual weight being placed in the truck bed. The engine was then briefly shut off and restarted, aligning with possible unloading activity. At 1:45, the truck started again for the uninterrupted return trip. Reviewing the final composite, Crane saw a coherent timeline: 21:32 departure from home, 21:48 gas stop, 22:15 leaving town limits, 23:07 arrival at cabin, 1:48 departure from cabin, 3:25 back home. He compared it to Ethan's original statement that he stayed home all night after his wife left around 21 o'clock, a contradiction now proven by indisputable digital evidence. Cell tower data further showed Ethan's phone lost signal from 22:50, 1:40, while the truck was parked at the cabin, then reconnected near Truth or Consequences. Combining all sources, OnStar cell tower records, and the autopsy, Crane constructed a complete timeline for the night of the disappearance. 21:15 argument at home, 21:32 truck leaves residence, 21:41 Lauren's final cell ping on highway, 187. 22:15 22:50 travel north, 23:07 arrival at Socorro cabin, 23:10 0 o'clock no communication signals. Likely period of fatal act, 1:48 departure from cabin, 3:25 return home. All events fell within a 6-hour window, matching the forensic time of death estimate of March 12, 14. Crane's signed digital analysis report included the travel map and signal graphs with the bolded conclusion, vehicle and cellular data, established direct travel connection between suspect and burial site within critical time frame. The data not only proved Ethan was present at the cabin the night Lauren died, but showed he traveled alone in the only vehicle capable of transporting a body. Upon finalizing the report, Crane reopened the 2013 file, crossed out route unknown, and wrote route confirmed via OnStar telemetry. 6 years later, technology had filled the gap that once existed in the case file, a minute-by-minute journey from the small house on Sunset Drive to the concrete slab where Lauren McKay was found. After completing the digital analysis proving Ethan McKay's route matched the burial location, Lieutenant Don Crane coordinated with the State Criminal Investigation Division to initiate the next phase, surveillance of the suspect at his new residence. Administrative records showed that after leaving Truth or Consequences in 2014, Ethan had moved to Albuquerque, where he now operated a small auto repair shop on East Central, and had remarried in 2017 to Marissa Kent, age 34. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Bernalillo County, in a single-story house with an attached garage. Crane and federal agents established covert surveillance, installing cameras with a 200-meter radius around the block, and monitoring daily routines. Initial observations indicated Ethan lived a normal life, worked regular hours, and showed no signs of suspecting the 2013 missing person case had been reopened. While awaiting a court order for direct sampling, Crane authorized indirect DNA collection from discarded household trash, a method permitted under New Mexico law for abandoned property. The surveillance team scheduled collection every Monday evening when the neighborhood garbage truck made its rounds. On July 1, 2019, they recovered 3 trash bags from the curb in front of Ethan's house containing a plastic water bottle, an old toothbrush, and a disposable coffee cup. All items were sealed and sent immediately to the Albuquerque DNA lab for biological extraction. 2 days later, preliminary results confirmed the cells from the toothbrush and cup produced the identical genetic profile to Ethan McKay's 2013 reference sample. On July 5, Crane requested direct comparison of that profile with the mixed DNA recovered from zip tie 221RZ, one found at the burial site. The report returned July 8 showed a match probability of 1 in 3.2 trillion, statistically conclusive for criminal identification purposes. The bolded conclusion read, DNA from collected garbage, consistent with contributor B from item 221RZ1. Reading that line, Crane knew the final link in the chain of evidence had closed. Lauren's body, her DNA on the zip tie, the matching travel route, and now Ethan's DNA on the same object, together forming direct proof connecting the suspect to the concealment of the crime. He immediately convened a meeting with the New Mexico Attorney General's office to request an arrest warrant. The operation was planned in detail, including local SWAT coordination, timing, and approach vectors. Because Ethan legally owned a handgun, Crane emphasized maximum officer safety. In internal notes he wrote, "Suspect unaware of active investigation. Maintain low profile until warrant issued." On July 9th, Crane and the prosecutor presented the full chain of evidence to a Bernalillo County judge. Mixed DNA results, OnStar travel data, the autopsy confirming mechanical asphyxia, and all 2013 financial and physical evidence. After 2 hours of review, the court issued arrest warrant 19674 WA charging first-degree murder, concealment of a body, and obstruction of justice. Crane received the signed warrant at 18 o'clock, briefed the tactical team, assigned primary entry through the front door, secondary through the rear, and technical containment of the perimeter. As night fell over Albuquerque, surveillance units maintained position around the beige house on Marigold Drive, where garage lights still glowed steadily. Crane sat in the command vehicle, watching the front door through night vision binoculars, the warrant clenched in his coat pocket. 6 years after signing the report that closed Lauren's missing person case, he was about to sign another document, this time an arrest warrant for the husband once treated only as a witness, now proven by undeniable DNA to be the killer. In his duty log, he wrote one short line before closing the notebook: "Target located, operation scheduled at dawn." At dawn on June 11, 2020, nearly a year after the warrant was issued, Operation Marigold Dawn commenced in Albuquerque, coordinated by the FBI Santa Fe Field Office, New Mexico State Police, and Valencia Cold Case Unit. The 13-member tactical team divided into 3 entry groups under Lieutenant Don Crane's command. The target was the single-story residence on Marigold Avenue, where Ethan McKay lived with his second wife. At 5:02, the execution signal went out over radio. Group 1 approached the front door. Group 2 blocked the garage. Group 3 sealed the rear. From the command vehicle, Crane watched live body cam feeds, his voice low and firm. "Execute." 4 loud knocks broke the morning silence, followed by the announcement, "Federal agents. Open the door." No response. After 30 seconds, Group 1 deployed the mechanical breach tool. The door flew open amid dust and flashbang smoke. In the beams of weapon lights, Ethan McKay appeared in the hallway, wearing a gray t-shirt, hands raised, face pale. His wife stood behind him, stunned. There was no resistance. 2 agents immediately took him into custody, applied handcuffs, and read him his Miranda rights. The entire entry lasted under 2 minutes. When asked if he understood his rights, Ethan nodded and said only, "I know why you're here." After the house was secured, technicians seized a laptop, cell phones, and 2 external hard drives. Crane entered last. His eyes landed briefly on a wedding photo hanging in the living room. Ethan in a black suit with a forced smile beside his new wife. He did not pause, simply signaled the tech team to continue sealing digital evidence. At 6:10, the suspect was escorted to the waiting FBI transport outside the gate. Neighbors began peering through curtains, some filmed on phones as red and blue lights reflected off the dew-wet street. Ethan remained silent, head down, as Crane reread the warrant and charges: first-degree murder, concealment of a body, obstruction of investigation, and false statements to authorities. He was taken to the FBI Albuquerque field office for booking, fingerprints, photographs, and medical screening. In the interview room, Crane was present while staff processed the detention order and transferred custody to state police. Ethan did not immediately request counsel. He only asked to make one phone call to his wife. After processing, he was placed in a state transport headed to Valencia County, where the original case originated and where his first formal interrogation awaited. The drive lasted over 2.5 hours. Ethan sat between 2 officers, staring out the window, asking nothing, showing no reaction to radio traffic reporting, subject, and wrote, ETA 1040. Crane followed in the trailing command vehicle, silently watching the desert morning pass by. 6 years earlier, he had left Valencia in defeat with an unsolved missing person file. Now the same road brought him back with the same name, Lauren McKay. But this time to close the longest investigation of his career. The convoy entered the cold case unit compound at 10:42. Officers waited in formation. Ethan McKay stepped down, wrists cuffed in front, sunlight glinting off the steel. A local reporter happened to be present and captured the moment. The photo later ran on every evening newscast. On the steps of the building, Crane waited, temporary detention order in hand. As Ethan passed, Crane spoke only once. "Time to answer what you've never said for the past 7 years." The suspect was taken directly to the Valencia detention wing to prepare for formal interrogation. A 7-year manhunt ended on a quiet morning, the Albuquerque sunrise glinting off the handcuffs of a man once presumed innocent. Ethan McKay's interrogation took place on the morning of June 12, 2020, in the main interview room of the Valencia Cold Case Unit, supervised by the state prosecutor and Lieutenant Don Crane. The entire session was recorded by 3 fixed-angle cameras and began at 9:12. Ethan entered wearing gray detention clothing, no longer cuffed, but sitting with arms tightly folded, eyes avoiding contact. Across from him sat Crane and FBI Special Agent Susan Hartley, who handled formalities and reread Miranda rights. When asked if he understood his rights and wished to have counsel, Ethan replied softly, "Yes, I understand," but declined an attorney, saying he wanted to explain clearly. The first 30 minutes focused on the timeline of March 12, 2013. Ethan repeated his original statement. He and Lauren argued. She left around 21 o'clock. He stayed home, watching television, and never left the house that night. When Crane asked about the Socorro cabin, Ethan appeared flustered and claimed he had owned it years earlier, but sold it. His voice stayed even, but his hands gripped the water cup tightly, and his eyes avoided the camera. Crane opened a thick folder and placed a color printout of the OnStar GPS map on the table. "This is the data from the truck you were driving that night. It left your house at 21:32, arrived at your cabin at 23:07, stayed almost 3 hours, then returned home at 3:25 a.m. Ethan stared down, lips pressed together, then answered, "I don't know, maybe a system error." Crane showed no reaction and displayed the cell tower graph. "Your phone lost signal exactly when the truck was stopped. Lauren's phone disconnected in the same area. Everything matches." Ethan kept his voice low. "I didn't kill her. I didn't take her there." Crane paused, then placed the sealed evidence bag containing zip tie 221RZ1 on the table, along with the mixed DNA report. Speaking slowly and clearly, "Lauren's DNA on the tip, yours on the body of the same tie, found where she was buried." Ethan inhaled deeply, briefly closed his eyes, but still denied, "I don't know why my DNA is on it. I used those ties repairing cars. Someone could have taken one from my garage." Crane continued without response, showing photos of the cabin, the cut concrete, the nylon-wrapped body, and the autopsy confirming mechanical asphyxia. "You poured that slab 3 days after Lauren disappeared. Cement purchased at Desert Supply at the same time. Why?" Ethan lowered his head for so long, Crane thought he might break, but when he looked up his voice was calmer. "I just wanted to bury everything, not in the way you think. I wanted to start over. I didn't bury her." Crane remained silent, while Hartley questioned post-disappearance behavior, large cash withdrawals, selling the cabin, replacing carpet, and leaving town. Ethan repeated that he wanted to forget and needed stability for the kids. When Hartley presented the 2019 trash DNA comparison, proving absolute identity with the zip tie sample, Ethan fell silent. The room held only the wall clock and the faint tap of a pen. After more than 2 hours, Crane said, "Ethan, 6 years ago, I signed the report closing Lauren's case. Today, I'm the one who signed to reopen it. I wouldn't do that if I wasn't certain." Ethan looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, "You don't understand. It wasn't like that," but he refused to say more and requested counsel. The interview ended at 11:41. The full transcript was archived under case number 19674 QA and signed by Crane and Hartley. In the closing report, Crane wrote, "Subject denied direct involvement despite conclusive forensic evidence. Interview terminated upon request for counsel." no confession obtained. Although no confession was given, the evidence chain was complete. OnStar data, cell tower records, mixed DNA, physical evidence at the scene, autopsy findings, and concealment behavior. That same afternoon, the entire file was transferred to the New Mexico Attorney General's office with a formal recommendation to prosecute. As Crane signed the transmittal form, he paused for a second, looking at the cover page. Case, State of New Mexico. Ethan McKay, charge murder in the first degree. 6 years of investigation, hundreds of documents, now condensed into a 2-inch thick folder, enough to hand over to prosecutors and begin the next phase of justice. On June 18, 2020, after receiving the complete investigative file from the Cold Case Unit Valencia, the New Mexico State Prosecutor's Office formally issued a criminal indictment against defendant Ethan McKay. The 47-page indictment contained 3 main charges: first-degree murder under Section February 1, 30 of the New Mexico Criminal Code, tampering with evidence and concealing a crime under Section 3022-5, and unlawful burial of a body under Section September 6, 30. The indictment listed 73 items of evidence collected over 7 years of investigation, ranging from zip ties, nylon fragments, soil samples, DNA traces, to GPS data, OnStar records, cell tower logs, receipts for purchased materials, and forensic reports. Attached were 400 pages of documentation proving the defendant's chain of conduct, including search warrants, photographs of the Socorro cabin excavation, travel route maps, and detailed expert reports. In the argument section, lead prosecutor Catherine Morales stated, "The physical, digital, and biological evidence forms an unbroken chain that identifies the defendant as the sole individual with the ability to access, transport, and bury the victim's body." The prosecution also attached sworn affidavits from forensic experts, Dr. Mariah Estrada, technician Ella Montrose, and geotechnical engineer Raymond Cota, testifying to the discovery, preservation, and examination of the evidence. From a digital perspective, the report by expert Jacob Rowe served as central evidence, describing in detail the route of the Ford F-150 on the night of March 12, 2013, and cell tower data that perfectly matched the moment Lauren McKay's signal disappeared. The indictment also highlighted the defendant's purchases of materials, cement, plastic tarps, and a carpet knife within 4 days before and after the disappearance, viewed as preparation for concealing the body. All evidence had been cataloged, sealed, and stored at Evidence Vault Number 3 of the Bernalillo County Courthouse, ensuring a complete chain of custody. Morales signed the final confirmation on page 47. The state of New Mexico has sufficient probable cause to proceed with prosecution. On the morning of June 22, the case file was officially transferred to the Albuquerque District Court, where Judge Daniel Healy was assigned to preside. The court issued a notice scheduling the initial hearing, confirming case number CR 2021-1187, titled State of New Mexico v. Ethan McKay. That same day, Crane received a copy of the indictment. He read every line carefully and highlighted the key passages that recounted the entire 7-year journey he and his team had pursued. Color prints of the cabin, GPR charts, and route diagrams were attached to the file, turning an investigation once buried in failure into the most comprehensive charging document the Cold Case Unit had ever submitted to court. When the indictment was released internally, local media outlets began reporting, emphasizing that the Lauren McKay case, one of New Mexico's longest-running missing person cases, had finally been brought to light. During a brief meeting in Valencia that afternoon, Crane placed the copy of the indictment on the table, looked at the bold lettering on the cover, People of the State of New Mexico versus Ethan McKay, Homicide and Evidence Tampering. He said nothing, only nodded slightly. After 7 years, 73 pieces of evidence, more than 400 pages of documentation, and thousands of hours of work, the case was no longer a cold case. It had become a formal criminal prosecution, transferred to the Albuquerque court to prepare for trial, where Ethan McKay's fate would be decided by evidence, science, and justice. In July 2020, after the Albuquerque District Court accepted the case file for State of New Mexico versus Ethan McKay, the state prosecutor's office officially entered the trial preparation phase. Chief Prosecutor Catherine Morales directed a 6-member legal team responsible for compiling and organizing all evidence for trial. In the first weeks, technical, forensic, and investigative teams were successively summoned to re-examine the chain of evidence, ensuring no discrepancies in sealing or collection procedures. Morales required every piece of evidence to have at least 2 verifying witnesses and built the courtroom presentation sequence around 3 blocks: physical evidence, digital evidence, and behavioral evidence. The presentation plan was drafted minute by minute, opening with the testimony of Lieutenant Don Crane, who led the entire reinvestigation, followed by forensic pathologist Dr. Mariah Estrada, DNA technician Ella Montrose, and ground-penetrating radar engineer Raymond Cota. The Ford F-150's digital data and OnStar GPS maps would be projected live in court, combined with cell tower bar graphs to create a visual timeline showing the journey from the McKay home to the Socorro cabin, where Lauren's body was found. Morales also ordered a 3D model of the cabin built using forensic software and GPR excavation data to simulate the concrete floor structure, helping the jury visualize how the body had been buried. Meanwhile, court-appointed defense counsel for Ethan, Robert Denning, a specialist in complex criminal cases, initially argued that there is no direct witness and no evidence the killing was intentional. The prosecution countered that the DNA chain and digital trail were sufficient to constitute proof beyond reasonable doubt. During preparation meetings, Morales and Crane repeatedly reviewed crime scene photos and witness statements, especially minor details like cement residue, nylon layers, and zip tie placement, to emphasize premeditation and calculated sequence of actions. The Albuquerque District Court announced the random selection of 42 citizens from the Bernalillo voter rolls for jury selection. On August 12, the voir dire process took place in the main courtroom under Judge Daniel Healy's supervision. Both sides were allowed to question candidates about their views on criminal cases, scientific evidence, and the role of DNA in trials. Many candidates were excused for having relatives in forensics or showing excessive prior knowledge from media coverage. Ultimately, 12 jurors and 2 alternates were seated, 7 women and 7 men, ages 29 to 62, none with ties to law enforcement or the victim's family. When the jury list was announced, the court ordered a media gag and anonymity to ensure fairness. Simultaneously, Prosecutor Morales submitted a 188-page evidence plan to the court clerk, listing the presentation order for each exhibit, starting with zip tie 221RZ1, followed by the DNA report, cabin excavation photos, OnStar route map, and ending with the forensic report confirming cause of death. Supporting exhibits such as receipts, carpet replacement photos, wastewater samples, and garage images were grouped as circumstantial to reinforce concealment behavior. Judge Healy reviewed the entire catalog and ordered digital copies for projection. The final pre-trial conference was held on September 4, setting the trial opening for September 21, 2020, expected to last 3 weeks. Crane, as the primary witness, was summoned to prepare his opening testimony. He spent nearly a week reviewing old reports and rehearsing his account of discovering the cabin and excavating the body. On September 18, the prosecution formally filed the final charging document, signed by Chief Prosecutor Morales and Deputy Charles Nguyen, confirming 73 exhibits, 29 witnesses, total record length, 412 pages. The court issued a public notice, trial for Ethan McKay, charged with first-degree murder, scheduled to commence September 21, 2020, Courtroom B, Albuquerque District Court. In the Valencia Cold Case Unit office, Crane read the notice on screen and said only one short sentence, "Finally, we're going to court." 7 years after the initial missing person report, every piece of evidence, witness, and exhibit now stood ready at the gates of justice, prepared to be presented in the trial that would decide Ethan McKay's fate and close the Lauren McKay case that had haunted them for nearly a decade. On the morning of September 21, 2020, Courtroom B of the Albuquerque District Court was packed when the trial of State of New Mexico versus Ethan McKay officially began. The prosecution team was led by Catherine Morales. Opposite her sat defense attorney Robert Denning and his legal assistant. In the center rows, the 12 jurors sat upright. Behind them were reporters and members of the public who had followed the case for 7 years. Judge Daniel Healy presided, delivering opening remarks and reminding all parties to follow procedure and not let media influence judgment. At 9:15 a.m., Prosecutor Morales stood and opened with a firm statement. On the night of March 12, 2013, Lauren McKay did not simply vanish. She was murdered, and the person who murdered her is sitting right here. She then began presenting the forensic timeline built with 3D technology. On the large screen appeared the OnStar GPS route. Ethan's Ford F-150 left the house at 21:32, arrived at the Socorro cabin at 23:07, remained nearly 3 hours, then returned to Truth or Consequences. At the same moment, Lauren's cell tower data went dead at the same coordinates. Morales walked slowly across the courtroom, pointing at the screen. This is his route. And at the final point, 6 years later, police found Lauren's body. Next, the prosecution called Lieutenant Don Crane to the stand. He recounted the entire investigation, from the 2013 search, the case going cold, to reopening it, thanks to touch DNA technology. When asked about exhibits, Crane presented the sealed evidence bag containing zip tie 221RZ, one along with the DNA report. Morales displayed a copy of the report. The DNA on the tip of the tie matches Lauren McKay. The body of the tie matches Ethan McKay. Both profiles appear on the same object, found where the body was buried. The jury watched intently as the GPR map appeared, showing the anomaly beneath the cabin floor and the excavation process. The prosecution presented crime scene photos in sequence, the forensic report concluding death by mechanical asphyxia and time of death findings that aligned with the night of disappearance. Morales closed her presentation by highlighting calculated concealment. 3 days after his wife disappeared, the defendant bought cement, plastic tarps, and a carpet knife, the exact materials found at the scene. 6 years later, his DNA was still on the zip tie used to bind the victim. When she sat down, the courtroom fell completely silent. Defense attorney Denning then rose and began in a low voice. No one denies Lauren McKay is dead, but the question is this murder? He offered the theory that Lauren and Ethan had a fight. She fell and struck her head or suffocated in an unintentional accident. Denning argued there was no direct witness, no video, no soft tissue evidence of strangulation, and that circumstantial evidence cannot speak for the truth. He attempted to plant doubt in the jury's mind, stressing the incident could be a chain of mistakes and panic rather than premeditated murder. Denning also challenged Crane on the reliability of OnStar data, claiming the device could have logged the time incorrectly and that the truck stopping at the cabin proves nothing about what happened inside. Morales immediately objected, asking the court to note the argument lacked scientific basis. Judge Healy sustained the objection, but allowed Denning to continue questioning the witness about the timeline. When Crane was asked one final time, he replied briefly, "All data was verified by 3 independent sources, and the result never changes." The defendant was there that night. The first day continued with testimony from forensic experts. Dr. Estrada reaffirmed the cause of death as mechanical asphyxia by strangulation. Technician Montrose described the touch DNA process and a match probability of 1 in 3.2 trillion. And engineer Coda presented the ground-penetrating radar map that detected the buried object. When the screen showed the body wrapped in nylon with ligature marks on the neck bones, several people in the gallery looked down. Morales simply said, "This was no accident." At the end of the day, the judge adjourned until the following morning. As Ethan was let out, camera flashes fired non-stop. On the prosecution table, Morales neatly stacked the thick files, 73 exhibits, 400 pages of reports, all of which had been introduced on the first day, opening the final battle between forensic truth and the defense claim of an accident. On the morning of September 22, 2020, the trial entered its second day, focusing on cross-verification of scientific evidence by independent forensic teams. Prosecutor Morales began by presenting a summary table of DNA results performed by 3 separate laboratories to rule out error. Reports from the New Mexico State Crime Lab, the Denver Forensic Institute, and the Federal DNA Analysis Center all confirmed an absolute match between the DNA recovered from zip tie 221 NRZ1 and Ethan McKay's reference sample. The statistical probability of random match was calculated at 1 in 9.6 trillion, effectively impossible by coincidence. Morales approached the witness stand, questioned Dr. Mariah Estrada about cross-laboratory validation, and Estrada confirmed every sample had been stored at 20 degrees Celsius with continuous chain of custody coding and no breaches. The prosecution then moved to GPS and OnStar data, displaying on the large screen a minute-by-minute route chart. The red line showed Ethan's vehicle departing Truth or Consequences at 21:32, stopping 178 minutes at the Socorro cabin, leaving at 0:47 a.m., and returning home at 2:15 a.m. The blue line was Lauren's phone data, cutting out 0.4 miles from the cabin. Morales pointed to the intersection of the 2 lines and said, "This is the only time and place both devices stopped, and that is exactly where the body was recovered." The jury sat in silence, many taking rapid notes, while Attorney Denning leaned over to study the map. Next, materials engineer Raymond Cota took the stand, bringing a core sample drilled from the cabin floor. He explained it consisted of 3 layers, a surface layer of fresh cement, a middle layer mixed with nylon debris, and an abnormally thick bottom layer containing decomposed organic traces. Cota stated the cement brand and mix ratio exactly matched the receipt from Ethan's purchase at Socorro Supply on March 15, 2013. When asked whether the match could be coincidental, Cota replied firmly, "No, the plastic fiber additive and 3:1 sand to cement ratio only appeared in the batch sold that day." The next slide showed close-up photos of the drilled core, clearly revealing nylon fibers identical to those used to wrap the victim. Morales combined the 3 datasets, DNA, GPS, and materials, into a single chart she called the physical chain of causation. She argued this proved Ethan was not only present, but actively prepared, transported, and concealed the body. When the judge allowed cross-examination, Denning attempted to argue that DNA could have transferred through innocent contact and someone else could have poured the cement. The prosecution countered that the DNA on the zip tie was embedded beneath the nylon layer, impossible by casual contact, and that the cabin was owned by Ethan with no record of third-party access during the relevant period. The prosecution then displayed side-by-side photos from 2013 and 2020 showing the freshly poured section with different color, abnormal thickness, and the presence of chemically fused nylon. Estrada explained, "This reaction only occurs when nylon is mixed into cement under high temperature, proving the body was wrapped in nylon before concrete was poured over it." Denning no longer argued directly, but only took notes. While the jury watched the final image, a heat map from ground-penetrating radar, precisely marking the anomaly where the body was excavated. Morales closed the morning with a concise summary. DNA says he was there. GPS says he moved the body. Cement says he buried it. None of the 3 is random. When she sat down, Judge Healy instructed the clerk to note that the accident argument no longer had scientific foundation because the evidence had demonstrated premeditation. The courtroom atmosphere grew heavy. The only sounds the ceiling fans and scribbling pens. Ethan sat motionless, staring at the table, while jurors exchanged silent glances. The judge then adjourned the scientific evidence phase for lunch recess. As everyone rose, Morales closed her folder of more than 200 pages, knowing that after this morning's session, the defense's accident theory had completely collapsed under the weight of DNA, GPS, and concrete. 3 layers of undeniable truth. On the afternoon of September 25, 2020, after nearly a week of trial, Judge Daniel Healy declared the close of arguments and handed the case to the jury for deliberation. The 12 members entered the jury room at 1:40 p.m., taking with them copies of all exhibits, crime scene diagrams, and forensic reports. For 6 hours they reviewed every photograph, cross-checked GPS charts with DNA results, re-examined witness testimony and expert reports. Large format prints of the zip tie, nylon and concrete layers were spread across the table as members marked points of alignment between behavior and forensic findings. One juror, a materials engineer, remarked, "There's no way this was an accident. This was planned." At 7:56 p.m., the jury rang for the bailiff, indicating they had reached a unanimous verdict. The entire courtroom rose as they filed back in, faces solemn, each holding a sheet of paper. The judge asked the clerk to read the verdict. Tension filled the room. Only the sound of turning pages and a pen tapping the desk could be heard. On count 1, murder in the first degree, the jury finds the defendant guilty. On count 2, tampering with evidence, the jury finds guilty. On count 3, unlawful burial or concealment of a body, the jury finds guilty. Each pronouncement of guilty was met with absolute silence, broken only by the clerk's pen. Ethan McKay sat upright, staring straight ahead, showing no emotion, while Prosecutor Morales bowed her head slightly, gripping her case file tightly. Lieutenant Don Crane sat in the back row, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the words guilty, all counts. When the reading concluded, Judge Healy asked both sides to rise and confirmed no immediate objections. The jury was thanked and dismissed. After a brief sentencing conference, the court moved to pronouncement of sentence. The prosecution requested the maximum penalty, life without parole. Morales argued that premeditated murder, years of concealment, and severe trauma inflicted on the victim's family were clear aggravating factors. Defense counsel Denning asked for leniency, citing the defendant's cooperation during investigation, but the judge rejected it, noting cooperation was late and not voluntary. He read the sentence in a steady, uninterrupted voice. The Albuquerque District Court, pursuant to Section February 1, 30 of the New Mexico Criminal Code, sentences defendant Ethan McKay to life imprisonment, without possibility of parole, for first-degree murder. 15 consecutive years for tampering with evidence, and 5 years for unlawful burial of a body. Total term to be served, life without possibility of parole. When the final words were spoken, the only sound was the gavel striking the wooden bench. Ethan stood silently as 2 deputies approached, handcuffed him, and led him from the courtroom without a word. Across the aisle, Morales looked at Crane and gave a small nod. He returned only a calm glance. Outside the courthouse, the Albuquerque sky was overcast, street lights just flickering on. After 6 hours of deliberation and 7 years of investigation, the Lauren McKay case officially closed with a sentence of life without parole, ending a journey in which every tiny clue, from a single phone ping to a strand of nylon, had led the entire New Mexico justice system to the final truth. Immediately after the Albuquerque District Court sentenced Ethan McKay to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, the Valencia Cold Case Unit proceeded with the final procedures to close the investigative file. Lieutenant Don Crane and the investigative team conducted a complete review of all evidence, re-examining transcripts, crime scene photographs, forensic reports, and digital data to ensure every document was fully, accurately, and completely archived with no omissions. Physical evidence items, such as zip ties, nylon, soil samples, and concrete fragments, were sealed, labeled, and transferred to long-term storage in accordance with New Mexico state protocols. The DNA lab performed one final comparison between the DNA samples from the zip ties, household trash, and reference profiles, confirming 0 discrepancies. Electronic copies of OnStar data, GPS records, and cell tower information were archived on secure servers and tagged closed, evidence verified. Crane, drafted a final 25-page comprehensive report detailing the entire timeline of events from Lauren McKay's disappearance in March 2013. Through the search phases, case closure, case reopening, the cabin excavation, and the determination of cause of death. The report also listed all 73 pieces of physical evidence and 400 pages of forensic, digital, and behavioral documentation, confirming that the case had been fully resolved based on scientific evidence and the defendant's actions. The Valencia Cold Case Unit Chief signed off on the report, recording the file closure date as September 30, 2020, and simultaneously updated the case status in the national system to cold case solved, homicide confirmed, prosecution completed. The McKay file was red flagged, placed in the closed homicide storage area, and a digital copy was retained on the state server for future reference or statistical research. Crane held a final internal team meeting announcing the conclusion: all timelines, digital data, forensic evidence, and physical exhibits had been fully cross-checked with no information overlooked, and the case was officially closed. He also forwarded copies of the report to the New Mexico State Prosecutor's Office to finalize the legal file, ensuring Ethan McKay's conviction was synchronized with the investigative record. Administrative procedures concluded that same afternoon. Crane stood quietly gazing at the thick file folder with its red cover stamped Lauren McKay, case closed, feeling that a 7-year unresolved case had finally received justice. The entire file was preserved according to New Mexico's long-term archival standards, including both digital and physical copies, to serve any future appeals or inquiries. As Crane left the meeting room, the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the shelves and reflecting the words "Cold Case Solved," the final period on Lauren McKay's disappearance, and the end of a years-long chapter in the Valencia Cold Case Unit's criminal investigation history. After the Lauren McKay case file was officially closed and marked Cold Case Solved, the Valencia Cold Case Unit compiled a 38-page comprehensive technical report to systematically preserve the entire investigative process in detail. The report documented 78 collected samples from various stages of the case, including zip ties, gloves, nylon pieces, concrete samples, soil material, and electronic evidence such as hard drives, cell phones, and OnStar data copies. During compilation, the forensic lab confirmed 14 DNA tests had been conducted, 3 samples definitively identified victim Lauren McKay, 4 confirmed suspect Ethan McKay's DNA, and the remainder were secondary comparison samples to rule out other genetic sources. The report also listed 3 secondary crime scenes: the Desert Fuel gas station where Ethan stopped, County Road 52 leading to the Socorro cabin, and the McKay residence garage where traces of concrete material and plastic sheeting related to concealing the body were discovered. Each entry included detailed descriptions of location, time, preservation conditions, crime scene photos, and examination results. The methodology section outlined testing procedures, digital data extraction, use of ground-penetrating radar (GPR), excavation steps at the cabin, and measures to protect the chain of custody. The report concluded that the chain of physical, DNA, and digital evidence formed a tightly linked pattern that established murder and body concealment, ruling out accident or random occurrence. The full report was sealed and stored in the Valencia Cold Case Unit archives, both hard copy and digital, with file number 13221TC for future reference or statistical cold case research. This technical summary became a benchmark document, recording every investigative step from 2013 until case resolution in 2020, serving as a comprehensive reference file for investigators, prosecutors, and judges involved. Immediately after the technical summary was completed, the Valencia Cold Case Unit carried out the final archiving step for the Lauren McKay case file, marking the complete end of the investigative process. All physical evidence, including the 78 samples, hard drives containing digital data, printed DNA results, GPR maps, and cabin excavation photos, along with over 400 pages of administrative and forensic documents, was sealed in standard evidence containers labeled Case #1137, McKay, Lauren, Closed Homicide. These containers were transferred to the Santa Fe Evidence Center, New Mexico's central storage facility that manages all cold case and closed criminal case records. Warehouse staff verified that seals were intact. Each bag and box was inventoried against the storage manifest, and barcodes, dates, and signatures of responsible officers were checked. The file was entered into the closed cases, solved category, and annotated in the state electronic system with detailed information on the offense, disappearance date, body recovery date, forensic findings, and trial outcome. Every data point was digitized, with both paper and electronic backups stored in a secure system for future access or review. The Valencia Cold Case Unit submitted a transfer memorandum to the state prosecutor's office, confirming the file had been closed, sealed, and handed over per standard procedure, noting, "All evidence verified, chain of custody maintained, case closed and archived." Lieutenant Don Crane signed the completion certification, closing a long chapter in the unit's investigative history. The Santa Fe Evidence Center placed the file on Shelf 14B alongside other solved cases and updated the internal retrieval system so investigators, prosecutors, or courts could access it if needed. Case #1137 now remains inactive with no further active investigation, yet all physical evidence and legal documentation is fully, securely, and retrievably preserved. This was the final step in closing the Lauren McKay case, from disappearance in 2013 to criminal resolution in 2020, officially placing the entire file into the solved and sealed category at the Santa Fe Evidence Center. In July 2020, after all physical evidence, digital data, forensic reports, and court records had been sealed and archived at the Santa Fe Evidence Center, the Valencia Cold Case Unit completed the entire management and closure process for the Lauren McKay case. Lieutenant Don Crane performed a final inventory check, confirming that the 78 samples, 14 DNA tests, 3 secondary scenes, and more than 400 pages of related documentation were all correctly stored, fully sealed, and signed off by responsible personnel. The state electronic system was updated to its final status, and all digital data, scanned paper records, and crime scene images were classified under closed, solved cases. In the final summary memorandum, Crane wrote, "All investigative procedures completed, chain of custody maintained, no further action required." The last bolded note on case #1137 read, "Case #1137, solved after 7 years, officially closing a cold case that had lingered since Lauren McKay's 2013 disappearance until Ethan McKay's trial and life sentence without parole." Closing the file not only marked the success of years of investigative effort, evidence review, and advanced forensic technology, but also set a standard for storage and reference in future cold cases. All information, evidence, and records are preserved for any future appeals, legal inquiries, or statistical research, while fully documenting that justice was served and concluding a long chapter in New Mexico's criminal investigation history. The Lauren McKay case, spanning from 2013 to full resolution in 2020, offers profound lessons that remain highly relevant to modern life in the United States, where many families live in small, isolated communities that can sometimes become cut off from outside help with internal problems. First, the fact that Lauren left home after an argument with her husband and vanished immediately afterward reminds us of the importance of listening for and noticing signs of domestic tension. What seem like ordinary marital conflicts can be warning signals of potential violence. Second, the way investigator Don Crane and the Cold Case Unit persistently tracked GPS, cell tower, OnStar data, and combined it with DNA evidence to reopen the file underscores the critical value of carefully preserving information and digital records. In today's world, keeping track of devices and storing personal data and important records can help resolve emergencies, especially those involving personal safety. Additionally, the detail of Ethan McKay hiding the body using an abandoned cabin and a concrete pour serves as a warning to stay aware of unusual changes in one's surroundings. Neighbors, communities, and authorities need to remain vigilant and not ignore abnormal property alterations or behavior in their area. Finally, the case being solved through modern technologies like touch DNA, ground-penetrating radar, and digital data analysis emphasizes that patience, interagency coordination, and the application of science to investigations are key factors. The takeaway is that in today's America, everyone should maintain awareness, preserve data, cooperate with authorities, and foster open family and community environments to prevent violence and protect the safety of themselves and their loved ones. Thank you for following the investigative journey of the Lauren McKay case, one of the longest and most complex cold cases in New Mexico. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can explore more gripping cases together, and we'll see you in the next video with more true and chilling stories from the world of crime.